Good afternoon. How's everybody doing now? How many people were in here for the opening track this morning and heard my spiel to kick it off? I should have asked the other way around. How many are like, this is your first marketing track thing today? All right, well, I gave you a private showing before, so I don't have to re-explain the whole thing. Welcome back. Hope you had a great lunch. Boy, I didn't know this was going to be a tuba jam session. Did you know that? I would have brought my tuba. And I'm sure all of you would have wanted to bring your tubas as well, huh? It was crazy, crazy fun. But just a day in the life here being a UW-Madison employee. Just get that stuff all the time. So anyways, yes, welcome back. We are back into our track, our most wonderful marketing track with 2 more talks this afternoon to inspire you and give you ideas on cool things happening, best practices, and emerging technologies in marketing. So to lead off our segment this afternoon, it is my great pleasure to welcome to our UWEBC stage Nancy Hensley. Nancy is a technology executive who specializes, I think it's fair to say, in data and analytics, passionate about data and analytics, always has been. But Nancy is also a huge sports enthusiast. Yeah, woohoo! And so she really, seriously, she is, for me, and hopefully for you, she's an inspiration because she's somebody who's been able to really blend passion and profession, like we're all told, you know, do something you love kind of thing. Nancy's actually been able to craft a career doing that. Her past 2 iterations that she'll tell you about in a moment have both combined data and technology analytics with sport. So when I first started chatting with Nancy about speaking at our conference this year, she was with a different company than she is today. She was with a company called Stats Perform, which is a global provider of sports data to a whole bunch of different industries. Where you see a sporting event on TV and they got the chyron of sporting data and stuff. They might get that data feed and stuff from a Stats Perform. That and lots of other industries that they served. When I started, that's the company she was with. In the interim, as we were getting ready for today's conference, she made a change, and she joined a very exciting new venture as co-founder, one of several co-founders based in London, UK, called Mercury 13, which is an organization that specializes in acquiring female football or soccer clubs, starting in Europe and in Latin America, with the idea of propelling their growth and commercialization, because, as you'll hear Nancy say in just a second, female football, soccer, is actually the growth stock in the world sporting environment. It is the fastest, it's on a huge growth trajectory. So she'll tell you a little bit more about that. But in a blinding flash of the obvious, did any of you know that sports evoke strong emotions and loyalty among their fans? It's true. It actually happens. And by attaching your brand or affiliating your brand, if it makes sense, with sport and sport data, your brand can tap into some of that emotional effervescence. It could make extra connections and connect with fans who are also consumers on that basis. And doing so can further a number of business objectives if it's done well, from expanding reach, because sport, like female women's football, is a global enterprise. And also, you can make those more different emotional connections that I mentioned just a moment ago, which, as marketers, is often the holy grail of what we're trying to do, is make an emotional connection with our customers. So, without any further ado, please join me in welcoming Nancy Hensley to the UWEBC stage. Hello, Nancy. Come on up.
Thank you.
Here's your clicker.
Yeah, let's get my face off the screen.
There we go.
All right, great.
Take it away.
Thank you so much for being here. We'll have something a little bit different. We're going to talk about sports. We're going to talk about sports data. I'm going to walk you through a journey a little bit more around who the sports fans are and why using data to connect with them will be a great way to get your brand on the global stage. So you did a great job of introducing me, but I always get the question of, how did you get to where you are now? So I have spent 25 plus years, it's a long time, in the tech industry primarily. I've always been focused in the area of data and AI, so I identify as a data and AI nerd who loves sports from Chicago. I've always believed that data has the power to change our lives, and I actually fell in love with data and analytics while in my time at McDonald's. We were at a doing some very cutting edge work and using spatial analysis to decide where we would put our next store. And then I would use that data to do a bunch of other things, and I thought, wow, this is cool, like data really can make us better. And then when the AI came along, I realized AI gave us superpowers we didn't have before. So I've continued to just stay within that realm. Most of that time was at IBM. I kind of bounced between product and marketing. They would ask me all the time, hey, Nancy, do you want to be a product exec or do you want to be a marketing exec? And I would say yes. And it would drive them nuts, to the point where they finally gave me a job where I could actually combine both of those things. I was part of a group of chief digital officers that worked on the product transformation, both from a growth perspective and digital perspective at IBM. And so it was kind of an intersection between product and marketing, so they finally gave me what I wanted to do. That's now known as PLG, product-led growth. But in the early days when I started working on it, it was called growth hacking. So it's evolved itself. 2020, I jumped into a role as Chief Product and Marketing Officer. They didn't make me choose either. As stats perform. As Roger was saying, we were a global analytics company. We focused on providing data and predictive analytics and solutions around that to teams and sports books and media. And then while I was there, I really became a very big advocate of women's sports, seeing a lot of the disparity and a lot of the inequities that surrounded women's sports, and I became a very vocal advocate, and that led me to what I'm doing today with Mercury 13. Now, because I know it's post-lunch, I actually brought our little walk-on video to kind of pump you up and give you a little bit of introduction of who Mercury 13 is, and it kind of raises the beat a little bit around the room. See if that plays. Oh, the music's not playing. There we go. We need that. So, cool, huh? So thank you. There are so many parallels between the story of the Mercury 13 astronauts. If you don't know the story, I'll tell you really quickly. There were 13 women that were put through the paces, the same paces as the astronauts that actually got to go to the moon. And they not only were able to do the same stress tests and physical tests, that in some ways they exceeded the men's capabilities. And so this was a personally financed program. Dr. Lovelace, who did the training for the astronauts, took this data to NASA. He was really excited. He said, look what the women did. And NASA said, oh, no, we can't have that. And the program was shut down just because they were women. And there's so many parallels between that, which inspired us for the name, and what has happened to women in sports in the same way. So many of you may not know that, for example, in the UK, women were banned from playing professional soccer for 50 years. 50 years. That ban ended in 1971. Not that long ago, right? And the reason why they were banned wasn't because people weren't interested. It actually was the opposite. It was right after there was a big game, and they actually couldn't fit everyone in the stadium. It was the Dick Kerr ladies. And the FA's reaction to that was very similar to NASA. Like, oh, no, we can't have this. This is not very ladylike. They actually tried to put out a lot of stories about how it's bad for women to play professional soccer. And then they eventually banned it. So that is the thing that fuels us today at Mercury 13. We're going to talk about women's sports a little bit later, but let's dive into the rest of the presentation. Now, the reason why I love working in sports is because it really does have the power to change the world. And so I love this quote from Nelson Mandela because it is the great unifier. It is the thing that helps us transcend language and geographies and most of the time politics. But it could be as a great unifier. So to have your brand associated with something that has this sort of power and influence is really, really powerful. But beyond that emotion, the global influence of sports is also quite large. So I didn't know until I started in the sports industry that the global sports industry, which is a $600 billion growing industry, contributes to 1% of the GDP. So it's not just important to us emotionally, it is important to us economically. And when you look at the sports and the numbers that are there, and the number one sport being soccer or football, and thank you for calling it football. I'll probably switch between two, but I kind of dynamically adjust to that conversation. When I'm in the US, I call it soccer. Soccer being the number one at 3.5 billion fans. It's viewed in over 200 countries. It clearly can put a brand on the global stage. But if you're a brand that's really very focused on the United States of America, you've got American football, which has a significant amount of fans in the millions, but it's primarily focused here in the US, although there's a big growing base in Germany and the UK. But sports activations generally have higher levels of conversions. And here's the thing, see all those billions and billions of fans? They are consumers. They are your target audience. And there is a great way for you to connect with them in a way that's very meaningful to them. And that's data. I always say that data is the DNA of sport because it flows through so many aspects of the sport ecosystem. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of how data is used in sports and AI is used in sports and also where it comes from. But it is definitely a way that brands can use this to create that connection because this is what fans are seeking. Right? This is what they're looking for. So if you can associate your brand with something they're seeking, you're on the right track. So to give you a little bit of an overview of how sports data and AI is leveraged, I'll cover a couple of these. So sports books, right? All that data that's flowing into the sports books, as well as how they figure out the kinds of markets or offers to put together so that they don't lose all their money with your bets. That's all based on data and AI. All the media content and digital publications, many of the articles that you read are actually used either generative AI or natural language generation capabilities from data are written from AI. Today, there's automated match day reports. There's data-infused experiences. I'm going to show you some of those because those also give brands another opportunity to get your brand into the spot, right into the viewing experience. There's fantasy. From a team perspective, and I can talk another hour just on this alone, teams are using it to do opposition strategy, to do player analysis, recruiting, team performance analysis. Of course, there's all sorts of fan engagement content. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. Social media is leveraging sports data in a huge way, and I'll give you some examples of that. And then, of course, brands and sponsorships who are taking advantage of this opportunity to get their brand on the global stage. So before we do that, I want to give you a little bit of a background on where does all this data come from. So sports data, much like media rights, is competed for and awarded to experts that then agree to collect and distribute the data. These are multi-year contracts. So it's a thing. It's a rights agreement, just like media. And one of the largest agreements, this just gives you the scale of this, was the NFL awarded their data award to a company, Genius Sports. So many of these companies that you see up there are sports data companies for $121 million a year. So Genius Sports pays the NFL $120 million a year to collect and distribute the data. So you can imagine they've got to have a really good monetization plan, which includes media and sponsorships, of course, to make sure that they can offset that cost of $120 million a year. Now, the roots of this business go all the way back to the 1980s. A gentleman named Bill James, who is one of the founders of Stats, actually. He's also the man that wrote the baseball abstracts, which was the inspiration for Moneyball. And he really believed that the fans wanted more stats and more content. So he actually got a bunch of his friends together. He crowdsourced a lot of that. And that was the beginning of Stats as a company. back into 1980s, and then he wrote the baseball abstracts, which Moneyball was based on. So it's been around for a long time. The data is collected in various ways. So it's collected by humans that are actually sitting in the venue, tapping away, very focused on the game, and streaming that data into sub-second response. And then that data is then aggregated, and predictive analytics and machine learning is used to create more models in real time, push it out to the media and to the sports books. It's also collected via people sitting in watching sports. So you can get a job as a data scout watching sports for hours on end, collecting that data. So Genius, Stats Perform, Radar has rooms of people that are just watching sports and collecting that data. So it's collected in person, it's collected via a human with video. They're called scouts. It's also collected via optical tracking cameras. Those are cameras that are just tracking the movement of the players. Sometimes there are wearables or things in the balls that also you can collect data from. And then in the last probably, I want to say 10 years, we are getting much, much better at using computer vision to collect data as well. And what's great about computer vision is you can then go back in time and get data, performance data from events that there was no data collected, no cameras, no tracking before. So that's all different ways that data is collected. It is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and each one of those companies is collecting billions of unique data points, and they're doing it all for the fans. So let's talk a little bit more about those fans, because how they're consuming sports has really, really changed. And this is really important from a brand perspective to understand this. Sports really hasn't changed, but how they consume it has. So sports started, obviously, if you're a sports fan, you may have only in the early days been able to go physically to a stadium to view sports. And then TV comes, and now you actually can see sports on TV. You could read them from a newspaper. You start to follow more than just one team. You follow teams and leagues because you have more ways to expose yourself to that. And then as OTT and streaming comes along, there are more and more and more opportunities. In fact, media rights are now so diverse, it's kind of crazy. It's almost hard to figure out where sports are when you're going to watch it on TV or streaming. But we also have been talking about this age of the fluid fan. And the fluid fan is a younger fan, and we'll talk a little bit more about who the fluid fan is. They're a younger fan, they're very technology focused, they're very focused on societal issues. They see technology as a way to better connect with the athlete. That may be through a streaming platform, it may be through social media. There are all sorts of new solutions out there that allows the fans and the athletes to connect. They watch them on TikTok, they're watching them on Instagram. The athletes it's almost like they're having more of a personal conversation with their fans. And the fluid fans are multimedia, more transmedia. They work across many different outlets. They are following not just teams and leagues, but they're also very committed to specific players. So if that player moves from one team to another, they follow that player. And the way sports has monetized, as you can see, what's interesting for brands and sponsors is look at the difference from a local fan to where the fluid fan is today, how much more important sponsorship revenue is. It's significantly different. Now, it's also very different between men versus women's sports, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I will tell you that in most women's sports, and I'm in the business of women's soccer, 80% of what we take in from a revenue perspective is based on media, sponsorship, and grants from the federations or the leagues. 80%. It is the complete opposite for the men. So the women are very, very good at brand activation because they have had to be. Here it goes. There we go. So the good news about this fluid fan is that they can be reached across multiple digital channels, and it gives brands more opportunities to reach out to them and reach out to them globally. The master of this is the NBA. The NBA, I mean, look at those numbers. They generated 18 billion views on social media in one single season. Now, it used to be the big game for sports was you advertise at something like the Super Bowl, and you paid millions of dollars for 60 seconds, and you might get 100 million views, and it's really quick. Social media gives a whole new opportunity, right? And so they've been able to very effectively globalize with a lot of their growth actually coming from outside of the US. And that has really helped build their growth strategy in the NBA. The NFL is trying to do this. NBA has been absolute masters at this. Now, when it comes to viewing experiences, there is definitely a difference in the generations. And I love this because I always use my husband as an example. When Prime Vision first came out, you had the choice between watching the game in a regular streaming mode or with the L bar with all the statistics. Of course, being the nerd that I am, I put on the L bar with all the statistics. My husband walked in, he sat down for 5 minutes. He was like, ew, no. And walks downstairs and put it on the bigger TV, does not want anything to do with stats on the screen. But if you're a brand and you want to reach a very specific generation of fans, and let's say it's boomers, it's not going to be putting the data and statistics on the screen. They're not going to be looking at it. But it's interesting to me to see like we're Generation X and we're Generation Z and where they are in things like different camera viewing angles, watching from the athlete's point of view, right? Social viewing, integrated betting capabilities. And that is definitely something that's on the rise right now, and integrated shopping capabilities as well. So speaking of that integrated data and stats, here's just a couple of examples just from recent. And this bottom right one I took from my TV a couple weeks ago. I have to tell another husband joke here. My husband always says his favorite sport to nap to is golf. See, you guys know what I'm talking about, right? So this was a golf tournament that was played in Chicago a few weeks ago. And if you look at that screen, look at all the data on that screen. I've never seen a golf production like that. It almost would be difficult for him to nap to that because he'd have to pay attention. You see the Prime Vision L-bar version again. These are all opportunities as more and more data comes onto the screen in these viewing experiences for brands to actually have their name as a part of it. Your brand sponsoring for example, some of the stats that you see on the soccer field. Those are very advanced statistics. That was one of the projects I was working on at Stats Perform. These are advanced models that are predicting expected pass, expected threat, expected goals. Down on the bottom, you see an L-bar type experience on a betting show or a pregame show. You don't see this in Europe, by the way. They just don't let that happen. And then on the far left here on the bottom, that is an immersive betting and viewing experience all in one. This is a brand new solution that just came out. So you can watch the game and you can actually create a bet slip as you're watching the game. So more and more opportunities to bring all of that content into one place. I saw a statistic that 84% of adults, and it goes up higher when you get younger, and that are holding a second screen in their hand while they're watching sports. So you're dealing with a very distractive viewer, right? So how do you deal with that? You bring that into the experience. Now, the opportunities actually go beyond just the game day. There is a whole lead up to game day, and I saw a statistic that 43% of fans start looking for data and content on their favorite team or the favorite player leading up to the event, so up to like 3 or 4 days before the game day event. So they're looking for like matchups. Is this going to be a milestone? How many Grand Slams has he actually won? They're looking for content even before it starts. When it starts, 51% of the fans, while they're watching a game, are checking live stats specifically. 51%. You got a 51% chance to grab their attention. And then post-match, they want to know what happened, right? What was the result? Did we hit any milestones? Did we break any records? All of these are opportunities because fans are seeking this information out to get your brand out there. This is one of my favorite case studies, and I think I mentioned it in the abstract. So Clear Shampoo wanted to break into the Asia-Pacific market, specifically Indonesia. And what did they know about their target audience there, the men? They love the Premier League. So they thought, okay, first of all, we're going to put Ronaldo on the bottle. That's going to help, right? But they also bought some really interesting predictive data, things like live win probabilities and matchups, as well as a social media tool that they could push that out there. And they had a very successful campaign where they reached 14 million new clients in a much more meaningful way to them. So it was a fun campaign. It was something about reducing the stress and anxiety of watching the sport. We're going to give you a bunch of information. It's going to make it easier. Maybe you'll have less dandruff and hair loss. But what an interesting way to connect and expand into a market that you had a target to go after with something that's a really meaningful way to connect with them. Now, speaking of meaningful ways to connect, I also wanted to show you a little bit of research that was recently done from the Women's Sports Trust. And this is an organization that does a lot of data, pushes it out there so that we can better connect with our brands and sponsors with our consumers. And we asked the fans, like, what's important to you in activation? So what they got back was community and grassroots, really, really important. Now, these are women's sports fans. Sustainability, having the athlete be a part of it, fan participation opportunities. Those were all key part of the activations that were important to them. Good information if you are a brand that's looking to create activations that really, really hit the mark. Another case study. So what's been interesting is new brands coming into women's sports, for example, that weren't there before, like Johnnie Walker. And Johnnie Walker had a great campaign for the World Cup that hit a lot of those check marks. They had a grassroots call to action to watch the World Cup. If you signed up, Hannah Waddington would send you a text message with a little video saying, hey, this team is playing here, and then she would also give you the results as well. For every sign up, there was a donation to the Women's Sports Foundation. The Women's Sports Foundation is Billie Jean King's foundation, where she uses this to help grow women's sports and create some equity and more resources to women's sports in general. This was a highly successful campaign. And the call to action was very simple. Watch women's sports. Watch the World Cup. Very, very effective. And Johnnie Walker's brand got a lot of great exposure as a part of the Women's World Cup. Speaking of, and here's another great statistic for the Women's World Cup. For the final where the Australian team, the Matildas, played, 43% of the country of Australia, 43% of the country was watching that final. That represented $7 billion in buying power. If you were a brand that wanted to break into Australia, that was your moment, right? That was your moment. So it's providing a world stage with very unique opportunities, again, of much deeper and emotional connection with fans. Now, let's talk about what is the next big thing in sports for brands to pay attention to. If you couldn't have already told, it's women's sports. So let me give you some information. First of all, does anybody know what this is? Right. So like if you're a women's sports advocate like me, this was like an amazing day, right? Because we broke the world record, which was only set a year ago at a soccer game, but we broke the world record for a women's volleyball game. And this keeps happening. Women's sports are on like a trajectory of growth like we have never seen. It's super exciting. And let me throw some data at you. So the World Cup, we had 2 million fans in the stands, but we had 2 billion watching it. Now remember, it was going on the other side of the world. People literally got up in the middle of the night to watch the World Cup. That is pretty darn amazing. Average attendance per match was 31,000. That's pretty good. Put it in perspective, women's matches just don't get the same level of attendance. So we get really excited about large crowds. The US Open, Coco Gauff's final beat Medvedev's final. More people watch Coco Gauff. The National Women's Soccer League, this past season, we continue to break records in season. And the value of these teams continue to grow. So has anybody heard of the new expansion team out of Los Angeles? There's a couple of expansion teams. Angel City started only a few years ago. At the time when they got their expansion, they were worth about $4 million. They just got an evaluation of $100 million. Now, Angel City has never made it into the playoffs. They didn't do so hot. They've been hit with a lot of injuries. How did they create that value? Brand. It's all in the brand, the sponsors they've aligned to, the experience that they've created. It's amazing. You can see more statistics there in terms of March Madness. Like we keep seeing consistent growth. This is an opportunity for a lot of brands to get in on the growth trajectory. Let's talk really quickly, because I got to play my video, on who the women's sports fan is, because there is a myth that only women are watching women's sports. That's not the case. Look at the data. It's actually mostly men. Well-educated, younger, right? Now in Europe, there's more of an even mix, by the way, of men and women. But it was interesting for me to see that it was mostly men here in the United States. And I get that all the time from people like, men don't watch women's sports. Yes, they do. And if you go look at the picture of 92,000 people in Nebraska, that was not all women. So it is a huge opportunity. Now, I want to play, get ready for your Kleenex. This is one of my favorite campaigns from the World Cup. The campaign was around confidence. But talk about a meaningful way to connect with your consumers. We're going to play this. Get your Kleenexes ready, because this is a doozy.
Aí vocês podem dar o play nesse vídeo aqui que tem uma mensagem pra vocês, tá bom?
Oi meninas, tudo bem? Eu queria falar um pouquinho de como eu vejo vocês no futuro. Ou melhor, eu queria mostrar como eu vejo vocês no futuro. Eu vejo vocês crescendo junto com o futebol feminino. Eu vejo vocês representando o nosso país e sendo referência para as próximas gerações. Eu vejo que vocês vão ver aí agora. Esse é o álbum do futuro. Um álbum para que vocês e mais meninas se vejam como futuras craques.
Meu sonho é, tipo, virar uma jogadora profissional. Que lindo! Parece realidade mesmo. Epa. Já pensou?
Continuem confiantes e quebrando barreiras.
Que ela mesma achava que era só pra homens, né? E eu vou junto com ela no sonho dela.
Continuem provando que o futebol também é pra menina.
A sua felicidade é a minha.
Mostrem que a gente não vai parar por aqui, porque o futebol feminino tá só aquecendo.
That gets me every time. That's why I do what I do. So great way to really, like, that really gets me every time, I swear to God. But they've really done a great job of creating that meaningful connection, grassroots, really excellent campaign that ran during the World Cup. Okay, now that I made you all cry. All right, so key takeaways. Sports fans are consumers, and connecting with them through sports and using data to do that gives you a very relevant and meaningful connection with them. Social media is a great way, a great channel to activate globally. There are lots of tools out there where you can pull that data in automatically and create these beautiful social graphics like the team did for the In Clear shampoo. And women's sports are on the rise. I keep saying it, they are the growth stock of sports. And so if you align your brand early, I think you'll be extremely happy. I might be slightly subjective to that, But the data doesn't lie, right? So, all right, that's it. Thank you so much for your time and attention.
Excellent.
Thank you.
So this time, it's our third talk of the day, and I'm finally standing in front of the camera so people watching me see me instead of hearing a voice from off on the side. So those who've been in the track before, which is the vast majority of you, kind of know how we roll here. Really want to hear your comments, your questions, anything that you have. Those of you who are watching via the streaming audience, you can put your comment or question in the live Q&A of the event portal. And I'll let you think in the room. In a second, I'll ask for questions or comments, but as I often do, I'll kind of seed it with my own question because I'm the MC and I get to do that. So, wow, powerful stuff. Now I'm going to go back off to the side. So that, it was a clear shampoo? Yeah, I wrote that down, that example. So did they need to, like, I'm interested in how a brand in the room, if they wanted to do this, like, would they have to license or buy that data? Or was that was like a social media screen you showed there?
Yes.
Did they have to buy that or pay anybody for that? Or?
So there's a tool that Stats Perform sells, and there's a couple on the market too called Pressbox Graphics, which allows you to do social graphic, and it comes with data packages. So you could literally you can do it yourself. They'll help you set up the templates. You can do it like in less than a minute and create these gorgeous graphics. If you watch the World Cup, either the men's or the women's, all of the social graphics were done with that tool that FIFA used.
Wow.
So very, very easy to use. It's not crazy out of reach budget, but that's how they did it. So they use data, they use social media, and they made those connections.
And if you wanted to use data, like you just watched a game this weekend and wanted to put it into a social media post at work tomorrow for the brand, do you have to pay anybody to do that? I mean,
no, that you don't. But if you wanted like the official data, and they use a lot of predictive data, like live win probabilities, more unique data that they thought would better connect with those fans.
Okay.
And I think that made their campaign even more successful.
That's super cool. Okay, comments, questions, observations, starting in the room here. Anybody? Yes. I'm going to get you a microphone so that, Jenny, can you? I can talk loud. But the people at home might not be able to hear you. Wasn't that great?
It was really great.
We were talking beforehand.
Thank you.
When you're with your company, are you doing the breakdown of a collegiate athlete, like a national level athlete or a professional athlete? Like, do you recommend to brands which way to go?
We're on the club ownership side, so we'll be like, now I'll become slightly more subjective because we will own multiple soccer teams. But what we will do is work with sponsors because we'll have football clubs, soccer teams in different geographies, and we can do a very bespoke type of sponsorship with them depending on where they want to connect with their fans. We'll also, as part of what we're doing, because I'll be running on the innovation side, is we're going to do a better job at collecting that fan data so we can give information back. That's one thing sports hasn't been as good at is understanding who those fans are. There's a really great story about when Spotify did this deal with, I think it was FC Barcelona. And FC Barcelona said, we have 175 million fans globally. And Spotify's like, score! And then when they went to try and leverage that, they were like, yeah, but we only have data on 1% of them. So we're going to do things differently in women's sports, and we're going to do a much better job at collecting that data and creating that value exchange with our fans so we can better tell the sponsors who they are. And that'll help inform those decisions much better.
Great. Next up, any? Jenny, check for the online portal if you would. And then meanwhile, do you see this, like opportunities for this, I guess, building on that question, is it a better fit or a closer fit for certain types of businesses? Like you think B2C, shampoo, but what about B2B, like a printing company or something?
I mean, going back, remember that one screen I showed you, what was important to them? If you have a CSR initiative or a local community or a community that you want to become more localized in, then these types of campaigns can really reach that. Whether it's here in the US or whether it's in Europe or whether it's a combination of both, then I think aligning with women's sports allows you to do that. But I also think that, and I think I've mentioned it before, is because these women professional, and I'll say professional soccer players because I know a little bit more about that than other ones, but the average professional soccer player in Europe makes, you want to take a guess at what she makes? $20,000. $20,000. Most of what they make is coming from them also aligning with brands and doing activations, and they're really, really good at it. They get much higher engagement on social than their male counterparts because they've had to get really good at it. So if you do invest in the women's side, they're much better at giving you a bigger return on your brand investment because they're just really good at that fan engagement.
Wow. Amazing. Anything from our online viewers? Comments, questions in here? Well, I think hearing none, Nancy, thank you.
Thank you very
so
much.
You're the best. I'll take the clicker back, the ceremonial passing back of the clicker.
Here's the clicker.
Thank you so much. So I think I have a slide up here, kind of what's next. Yes, so we are going to take a 15-minute transition break, which you are by now used to being at the conference. If you come back into this room at 3:25, going to have a fantastic story about stories and storytelling, one of my favorite things ever from Heidi Waldusky. But meanwhile, enjoy a break, and we'll see you back in 15 minutes. Got to do it again. Hello, 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 so people at home can hear. Hey, welcome back after a great break, and to our fourth and final talk in today's marketing track. Super excited to welcome to our stage Heidi Waldusky, VP of Brand Marketing for the venerable marketing services global printing company. Marketing services, a company that markets to marketers. I like what you had said, Heidi. So based right down the road in Milwaukee, I know we have a number of consortium member companies that print who are longtime clients of Quad's. But so just yet another connection that we have to Quad Graphics. So in the domain of content marketing, storytelling can be an extremely effective arrow in the marketer's quiver. Similar to the great story that we just heard Nancy Hensley share about the unique and special emotional bond that can be made with sports and fans, it's the same with storytelling. Done well, stories are memorable, they're engaging, and they can make that special connection to a brand that is, again, the holy grail of many of our marketing efforts. But did you know that storytelling done effectively can also be a way to help accelerate organizational change within your organization? Who knew? Anyways, today we're super fortunate to have with us Heidi from Quad, who's going to share a little bit about how they've been doing that, and she's been doing that, and her team's been doing that within the Quad Graphics world and ecosystem. So Heidi is part of a team that's been leading a transformation of a $3 billion company that markets to marketers, as I said. And today we're going to get her insider's view into how to use storytelling to level up a brand, to accelerate that change, and to respect the past while looking at the future, and how to do that while at the same time avoiding pitfalls and mines along the way. So please welcome Heidi Waldusky of Quad to our stage.
Thanks, Roger. Oh God, I groaned as I got up. Thank you so much.
The clicker.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I know we are the last session of the day. You know, last one, best one. That's what they say, guys. But I'm excited you're all in here because obviously you guys are passionate about storytelling and or organizational transformation and or both. And I want to tell you a little bit about what we've been up to at Quad, some lessons that we've learned along the way. It's been good times. It's been really good times, guys. So, you know, Roger's right. I'm the head of brand marketing over at Quad. And Quad's really been on a journey the last couple of years to sort of complete its transformation. We're best known as one of the largest commercial printers in North America. You know, today we are really an end-to-end marketing solutions provider. And I sort of represent this investment that Quad has made in the marketing department over the last couple of years to really accelerate our position in the marketplace and to really complete that transformation. Our team has grown probably from 8 people in 2021 to almost 70 today. It's been a lot. And as the brand marketing team, you know, what we've done over the last couple of years, we've We've done brand narrative exercise, we've reevaluated our company position, we've launched a new brand campaign, and at the heart of that really is storytelling. And at the heart of that also was, it wasn't just about communicating externally into market, it was about organizational transformation. So to kind of give us better context for that before I sort of get into it, I want to talk about what we think about storytelling when it comes to marketing. And why is it so important? Like, why do we all like it, right? When we think about storytelling, it serves a lot of purposes. It builds trust and authenticity of the brand. We know this, we can all agree with this. If we're thinking about our content strategy, the right approach to storytelling can help us take a more strategic approach to that content creation. When we're thinking about how we appear to our consumers and our target, it can humanize our organization. Right now, we're starting to get to the more emotional side of storytelling. But one of my personal favorites when I think about storytelling is that it helps us communicate experiences and emotions. I don't know what's happening with this photo here, but also, by the way, I told my creative director, I was like, pick whatever you want. And he did. So he is like the second persona. But I was like, you know what, Eric, I love it. You be you, let's go with it. But storytelling really helps us communicate those experiences and emotions. I think this is really critical because when it comes to those stories that we need people to believe, they're not scripts that we need people to memorize. They're beliefs that we need them to internalize. And to sort of get to the root of this, we want to take a look at sort of human psychology. I was listening to this podcast recently with Rory Sutherland. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he is vice Ogilvy UK. He kind of jokes, and it's a big enough title that allowed me to start a behavioral science practice over at Ogilvy UK because so much he believes in of human behavior and marketing. And this podcast is pretty long. It's 3 hours long. So I picked the best parts for you guys. It's with Rick Rubin. If you guys want to go find it and listen to it, it's pretty recently. But he sort of makes this point that as humans, we are wired to look at things with a lens of intent. We are wired to give things value. And when we think about that, and when we think about the power in that, he also goes on to say that the power of reframing things cannot be overstated. The way that we can shift the value that someone assigns to something, the way that we can move their intent, the way that we can influence their behavior. So the power of reframing cannot be overstated. And to prove this point, he gives this kind of old anecdote, and I apologize because it's about smoking and who smokes anymore. But anyway, he kind of gives this example where if you ask someone, is it okay to smoke while praying? They're likely to say no. But if you reframe it, if you flip it around and you say, is it okay to pray while smoking? They'll say yes, because humans are funny. And that's sort of what we do. And I just find that really entertaining, and it kind of brings us to the point of like, things are not what they are at all. They are what we think that they are. Again, as humans, we want to assign value to things, right? Also, like stories, they're not scripts we memorize, they're beliefs that we internalize. And that really is the core of storytelling. And we've accepted this when it comes to B2C. We've accepted this kind of as storytelling fact, right? We know that brands are like, yes, I have to do the storytelling thing. And consumers are smart, they're savvy. They have expected this now. They expect brands to entertain and delight them through the power of storytelling. Like, we've sort of accepted this as marketing fact in the B2C space, so much so that we spend a lot of time teaching marketers about it, right? There's conferences, there's books, there's tracks, there's whole things about storytelling and the power that they have with consumers, because it's not just a nicety. Storytelling has actually been proven to drive business results when it comes to the consumer space. We know this. But what about when it comes to organizational transformation? Why would it be so important then? You might be thinking like, well, Heidi, like, I'll just focus on telling stories to my consumers, and like that will be enough. But when it comes to organizational transformation, if I'm not connected to my employees, if they're not connected to the story that I'm telling, I'm never going to be able to deliver that story effectively to my consumers. And in the B2B space, specifically for Quad, these consumers are marketers that I have to put in a sales cycle, who are going to maybe come down in my little funnel because maybe they're attracted to the story that I'm telling. And they're going to run into a salesperson who's going to be like, what? And wholly disconnected from all the things that I've just been trying to do as a brand marketer. They're just not going to be connected to it, and my transformation is going to stop dead in its tracks. And that's no fun for anyone. There was actually kind of this great quote from Peter Drucker that I ran across recently that was about, his whole point was, I think everybody knows Peter Drucker here, he's kind of like modern management guru. And he is kind of famous for saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And what I think he meant by that is you can have the best business strategy in the world, but if you don't have a great culture, like it's never going to happen. And or focus more on your culture, right? Like kind of either or. But if we look at it through the lens of today, really both are important. You can't have a great culture if your employees don't know where you're going, and you can't have a great strategy if your employees are not buying into it. And the way that I think about that from a marketing standpoint really is the overlap of the two things. When I think about where does the right storytelling come from? How do I even find what stories to tell in the first place? I have to look at that overlap. I have to see what's true and best about our culture, what's true and best about our strategy, and that's where the right storytelling comes from. And it's not just where I'm going to mine the right stories, but how I'm also going to use them to drive both, right? It's kind of like this push and pull of storytelling. I'm using them to pay off my promise, but then I'm also using them to feed back to that promise in the first place, right? So it's this great little intersection and this nice little ooey gooey center of storytelling richness that now I can tap into that's going to be right in terms of what I'm saying to transform my organization, those connections that I'm going to make to empower people, to align people, to get them all kind of moving in the right direction. Now, this is also hard. It's not just, you might be like, how do you get a slide? And all we need to do is figure out our strategy and our culture and overlap them, and this is where the right storytelling is going to come from. But it is hard. It takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of alignment. And 24 months in at Quad, we still run into pitfalls all the time. So I kind of want to just be honest with you guys and share sort of 3 lessons that we've learned along the way that have been really important in how we approach this. And lesson number 1 is what I like to call beware shiny object syndrome. I don't know if you guys have ever worked with people who just love new ideas, right? And when you come in as a brand marketer, especially when you come in as marketing, which has essentially been brought on as a change agent, really, if you will, especially to a large organization that is in the midst of transformation, they're relying on marketing to do a lot of this lifting, not just externally to the market, but internally as well. And so when we came in, there was no shortage of opinions about what we needed to do. Everyone had a bias and a lens through which they wanted us to approach the storytelling. And there were a lot of new ideas too, let's just throw everything out. Let's start somewhere new. What about this? What about that? And so it was really important for us to maintain our focus and really get to the root of what is our culture? What is our strategy? And how do we do that? And to do that, we actually went back to our archives. I think we literally put on gloves and went into the archives. And Quad was founded in 1971 by Harry Quadracci, who is, by all accounts, just this wonderful, incredible man. He was exceptionally gregarious. He went above and beyond for his clients. This is when we started printing National Geographic, and they brought an elephant. We wouldn't do this today, but at the time, it was really great. He went above and beyond for his clients and his employees. They used to do these theatrical reviews at the end of the year for all Quad employees. All the executives would literally perform for the teams. It looked like a lot of fun. And Harry really believed that if you just empowered people, that if you just did the right thing, that if you just created a better way, that business would be better, that things could be better. And what we realized in digging through this, at that point, it wasn't just legend about some great man, it was legacy. And legacy is a very loaded word, because legacy can also be an excuse not to change. It can be an excuse for companies to say, this is the way we've always done it. It's worked, other things are broken. Not this, we don't need to do it that way. But we didn't necessarily want to treat it that way, right? I didn't want to treat it like a pejorative. We wanted to kind of give it the respect that it deserves because we had this legacy of Harry. Because again, remember, people want to assign value to things, and the industry and Quad had assigned that value to Harry. Harry was Quad. Quad was Harry. So if we got rid of our legacy, we're essentially saying, let's get rid of everything that we're founded on. And that wasn't going to work because we knew if we did that, we were going to risk alienating the advocates that we needed, right? Your employees are your best brand advocates. We knew that the intent that they would assign, remember, you know, human beings want to assign intent, like they would have been skeptical, right? They would have been like, marketing, can you believe it? Do you hear what these guys are saying, right? And we knew that they were never going to internalize our story because they weren't going to believe it, right? They were going to be like, here's these crazy new marketing kids from New York, you know, they want us to do all of these things, and it was just not going to ring true. If I looked again at that overlap of culture and strategy, it wasn't going to sit in the middle if I did anything but pay attention to that legacy. So what we did, taking kind of a page out of Rory Sutherland's playbook, we reframed it. We used it as a superpower. We didn't say, let's not talk about our legacy as a printer. We don't want to be as known for that anymore, right? We pulled it in and we used it to empower our company. So now the way we talk about our legacy is that it's what paves the way for our present and our future as a marketing disruptor. And it really has become this rallying cry internally to essentially say, we've always been a disruptor. Harry was an entrepreneur. Quad was a startup in 1971. We're all about change. Even went so far as to pull a quote of Harry's, we eat change for breakfast, right? He had like 50 or 60 sayings that he was kind of known for. And this was one of them. And we pulled it not because it was a nice quote from a founder, because it gives us permission to evolve as a company. So now anytime we kind of run up against some tension internally, we can be like, we change for breakfast. Remember, like we're nimble, we have to evolve, like we have to do this. And it really has made people comfortable and given them permission to kind of embrace the change that is happening and to go on the journey with us, which has been really great. The second lesson we learned is that transparency is your friend. And you know, when we were hired, Joel Quadracci, who is the son of the founder Harry, who is now our CEO, has been the CEO of Quad since 2006. He was like, your job, marketing, is to accelerate our market position. We were like, great. But because Joel has a sense of humor, he was also like, don't mess it up. And we were like, no problem. Right on top of that. And what essentially that made me want to do, because honestly, you know, it's not just, when I think about storytelling, it's not just to move the needle for a company, but it's to move the needle for its employees and then their families and our communities, right? Like this is really important stuff when we're talking about organizational change and growth and transformation. So what it made me want to do is I was like, okay, this is really important. So I'm just going to go in a corner for like 3 months and figure this out and then just kind of pop out of a cake with all of my homework done and be like, look, I figured it out. I figured out this really great sort of messy problem, right? It doesn't work that way, right? No marketer is an island. You know, we have to collaborate. And if I had just done that, if I had just kind of gone into my little hidey hole and said like, let me figure out this math problem and I'll come back to you and show it to you, they would have just sounded like proclamations. And transformative proclamations do not equal transformative storytelling. There's a lot of religious undertones in this presentation between the smoke and the praying, and Charles attests it. But at the end of the day, transformative proclamations do not equal transformative storytelling. They do not hold the same power. If we just get up and tell people what to do, it is not the same as bringing them along with us on the journey. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to show you my homework. Right? I'm going to show you what I'm doing. We're going to share that. I'm actually going to ask your opinion, and we're going to talk about what this looks and feels like. Quad has been doing a partnership with the University of Wisconsin for a executive leadership program, and we had the pleasure of hearing Susan Finnerty come speak at our last go round, and she specializes in operating within matrix organizations. And she said something that really stuck with me that was really interesting, and she said, people need behaviors, not platitudes. You know, it's not enough just to get up and say, like, guys, we're integrated. Guys, work better together. You know, guys, kind of do this. We're not a printer anymore. We're this marketing experience company, which is our new position. They needed to know what that looks and feels like. How do we act? How do we behave? How do we do this, right? And so that's why it was really important to kind of just shift our approach. Again, this level of sort of bringing people along the way. And there's a really great example of this of Steve Jobs. The reason this picture looks so old is because it's a screen grab from a video from 1997. Has anyone ever seen that video of Steve Jobs kind of on stage answering a video? Okay, I'll just kind of give a background, right? For those of you who might not know, he's at this developer conference in 1997. He's taking questions, and this very prickly developer gets up and essentially is like, I don't know why you're making the decisions you're making about X piece of software. And so I need you to explain to me why you're making these decisions. And oh, by the way, what have you been doing for the last 7 or 8 years, Steve? Right? And Steve Jobs, I wanted to play a little bit of it for you, but you really need to kind of watch the full 5-minute clip of it because it's really awesome. And it's really a masterclass in a pause. You know, he kind of stops and he takes a drink of water and he kind of begins to answer the question. But essentially what he says is that, listen, we're on this journey, right? All I know is that we can't take the technology and try to sell it to the customer. We have to focus on what the customer needs and develop technology that's going to delight them. And frankly, you know, we've got a long way to go, but we're building this culture here at Apple, and this is what we're invested in, and this is what we're doing. What he didn't do, because remember, this is like 4 years before the iPad, 10 years before the iPhone, he didn't get up and say, like, no, I have this great product roadmap, trust me. He just said, I don't know, guys. But all I know is that, you know, if we're making mistakes, that's good because at least I know decisions are being made along the way too. And people started to clap. And in that minute, he really started to get buy-in for his vision because he was willing to admit, like, I don't know either. And we're gonna make some mistakes along the way, but I do know in my gut as a leader that this is the right thing to do. And so we took a page right out of Steve Jobs' playbook and we were like, yes, okay, great. Hello, my name is transparency. And that's really how we approached it from then on. But what that did is it wasn't just about helping people believe the story. It builds trust in the author. And for them to start to understand that they can trust us, that they can put their trust in us to transform this organization, that we're not here to just throw the baby out with the bathwater, if you will, right? That there's care and intention in this transformation. They were willing, again, to be part of writing this with us. And what that also does is it makes them authors too. And when we talked about earlier, it's not a script you memorize, it's a belief you internalize, that was really important. Because when we first started doing this, and we would kind of come up with the new company positioning, and we would work with the leaders or whoever within the company, and I'd be like, okay, great, say it back to me. And then they would be like, Quad is a, it was horrible, right? They were almost felt like we were grading them on it. But we needed them to internalize it. We needed them to put it in their own words. And the more that they went through this with us, the more that they were part of the homework assignment, the more they can now really just internalize the belief system and now say it in their own words. So now 18 months later, when I hear my executives speak, it's not rote memorization at all. They feel it. So they can pivot, they can answer questions, they can advocate, they can work with their own teams to also internalize it, and it's been a really transformational thing. The last lesson that I'll share with you is about being a tugboat, not a speedboat. And with all the things that I talked about transformation, there's a lot of pressure to show results, right? Everyone's like, hey, we just made this big investment in marketing. We're all about this organizational transformation. Where are our results coming from? You know, what are we doing? Like, how are we showing progress? And to back up a little bit, when we first started at Quad, like Quad had a really strong why. Quad had a really strong story that kind of held, there was this glue that held the company together. It was mostly centered around Harry, and it was mostly centered around this idea of a better way. But since Harry passed away in 2006, like Quad was doing a lot of different things. Like we went public, we acquired a bunch of companies, we developed new products and services, and our why started to get really diluted. And that's just what happens. It's just what happens with an acquisition company and a growth company. You start to lose your center a little bit, right? And things just have a way of kind of taking their own shape. It's not necessarily a fault of the organization, but we just have to appreciate it and understand the context with which all this change is happening. And I think, you know, given this pressure to kind of show these results, we were like, we need to come in like a speedboat, and we're gonna take this like big battleship quad, and we're gonna speedboat it down the river, and we're gonna do all of these things, and we're just gonna move real fast. But that's a disaster, right? We're a B2B company with a 12 to 18-month sales cycle. It's not like I can flip a switch on the website and orders start pouring in. It just doesn't work that way, right? And if we take the speedboat approach, which honestly we did, it just creates a wake, right? And we started to see that people were kind of confused. They felt not listened to. They felt a little bit left out. We were surely missing things. There's just no way you can move that fast and not miss something. And for all the progress we thought we were making those first couple months, we were like, oh my God, we're checking off all these milestones. We were actually just missing them. And we were spending a lot of time backtracking to kind of fix, right? We were like, no, okay, let's do that again. And we were sort of repeating a lot of what we were doing. And I've heard a lot of really great quotes lately from marketing leaders about, be aware of what feels fast, right? It's just a false flag for progress. You can move a lot faster if you slow down, essentially. So we were like, the speedboat approach is not working. We need to tugboat. We need to tugboat, and we need to do it now. And so we decided to kind of pivot. And we didn't necessarily so much use a tugboat to piece back together something that was broken. We knew that we simply just needed to put the parts back together in a way where the whole became greater than the sum of its parts. A lot of what we talk about at Quad is like, how can we make 1 + 1 = 3? And that was really part of the tugboat approach that we took, is how do we guide people? How do we push them in the right direction? And how do we really get them aligned with where we need to be? And that's what a tugboat can do for you. Because honestly, at the end of the day, successful change is about timing and really finding the right pace for your organization. So as much as we want to change and as much as we want to move fast, we have to ask ourselves, like, what does our organization need? What is right for them? What's right for our employees? And honestly, like, we evaluated this all the time. Like, we would sit around in groups and we'd be like, is this right? Does this feel right? Does this feel too fast? And we kind of employed every tool at our disposal. We would have workshops, we would have town halls. We were constantly gathering feedback to help guide how fast our tugboat should move, where we should go, and how we should approach it. And that, at the end of the day, is really what accelerated our transformation more than anything else. So in summary, the lessons that I'll leave you with, if you're in the midst of your own transformation as an organization, is avoid shiny object syndrome, right? Like, where's your focus? Keep your focus. And it's not like, I'm gonna ignore everyone and I'm just gonna focus on what I'm doing, right? But it's really, where can you maintain your focus? How, as marketers, we're constantly in a state of curation, right? I'll take this, I'll leave that. I'll leave this, I'll take that, right? We're constantly picking and choosing the things that are gonna best inform our strategy, right? It's an art and a science. So the shiny object syndrome, again, you kind of have to maintain this focus and understand what to pull in and what to leave out. That's really how transformation occurs. If we're constantly being distracted by the next new shiny thing, we're never actually going to make progress in what we need to do. Second lesson, transparency is our friend, right? Don't be afraid to show your homework. Pull people into the fold, make them part of the storytelling, make them an offer, willingly hand them the pen and say, like, let's write this together, right? Just like every good book has a good editor, it's the same thing with organizational transformation. I think there was a talk earlier where someone had said, get a change agent, right? Bring a change agent in and you can accelerate your transformation. I say yes, and then I say, turn your employees into one too. And you can do that by transparency and sharing what you're doing with them and explaining. I mean, we shared a lot of things. I think we showed that Steve Jobs video. I think we showed a lot of marketing philosophy. Like, not only did we say, this is what we're doing, but then we said, this is why we're doing it, right? We kind of had to show them marketing best practices. Like, marketing wasn't a language that they spoke. So we were willing to kind of show, like, this is how we do our jobs. And that just created a much greater comfort level within it. And then the last thing is, you know, sometimes you need a tugboat, not a speedboat. I think you have to decide based on your organization. You know, there are some organizations that are like, forget the tugboat, we want to be a speedboat, and that's fine too. But again, I think when you're thinking about legacy brands and the care and attention that has to be paid, you know, especially when there's such a connection between a brand and so many of its employees, you know, you guys decide. And that's it. Actually, those are my 3 lessons. I'm like, I have no more slides, but thank you guys so much, and, you know, here for any questions.
I know Heidi had like about 100 other lessons, but I told her she had to kind of keep it to 3 for today. So we have stuff for her to come back next year and talk
That's
about.
right. That's right.
Thank you, Heidi. That
Thank
was
you
great.
so much.
So again, I think, first of all, questions are the obvious thing that Heidi's comments sparked from you. But and again, if you're tuning in virtually, you can put your questions in the live Q&A button on your console. But even that, I think Heidi and I would be interested to hear, do you have experiences with your own organizations doing storytelling that have been impactful, so that when you heard what Heidi was saying, you're like, oh yeah, that kind of, we had something like that. I think we'd love to hear anybody that would just share a reflection on storytelling from their own perspective. How many of you would you say are like involved in crafting stories or storytelling? So yeah, there's a fair, this is the marketing track for the most part. So I'd love to do that. I, as usual, also have a couple of things that I jotted down. One of them was, and so think about your comments or questions while I seed with this question. First of all, I'm glad that you mentioned that the legacy and in the transformative, I don't have my glasses, the transformative prescriptions versus the transformative...
Oh, the proclamations versus the storytelling.
Proclamations, yes. I'm glad you mentioned that in dealing with the legacy, because before you had done that, I had jotted down, can marketing actually lead? Let's say you have a new positioning as a company, like Quad did, we're going to be marketing services. Could marketing actually lead by sort of developing those stories? Should they be leading by saying, we're going to market, this is who we are, without bringing the other people in the company behind? Because like you said, the salespeople out there won't even be in sync with it, and then later you talk to it. Could you just say a couple?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't even work on a brand campaign, and we did a year's worth of internal alignment and storytelling before we even thought about launching a brand campaign. And there's no way we could have alignment, or there's no way we could have done what we had done if we didn't have internal alignment. And that just means like putting yourself in those uncomfortable situations, like with your sales leaders, with your sales teams, and just like opening yourself up to that. And again, like there are smart people within our companies. Like we cannot come in and say, we know better than you. Now, I will say a caveat to that is, as a brand marketer, sometimes like you have to know the company better than it knows itself, like especially when you're trying to bring a fresh perspective to it. But there's no way you can move the needle without getting that alignment and showing that you respect and understand where they are coming from as well. But they want to believe, they want to trust, we found, you know, they wanted to put their trust in marketing. We just had to show them that we weren't full of it while we were doing it.
Yeah, exactly. We wanted to have credit inside.
Right.
So, I mean, yours is an industry that's been undergoing disruption and transformation. There isn't as much printing of paper stuff as there once was, right?
Right.
And so I think I happen to live outside Milwaukee, in Sussex, where the world headquarters is. So I have a lot of friends and neighbors who are involved in Quad. And there was some, you know, I think you're making progress, I can tell you.
We're definitely making progress.
Yeah,
I mean, the way that we talk about it is like, we will never stop printing. We will always print. Like print will always be core to who we are, and there's an incredible amount of capabilities that have come from that, from our manufacturing side and our operations side. You know, specializing in logistics. There's a lot of thinking that comes with that. This idea of continuous improvement when you're in manufacturing, and we use a lot of that to our advantage. And honestly, when we talk about our manufacturing and operations, we almost talk about it like an ethos. And actually now it has become a marker of our culture. Like we talk about the people at Quad as makers, and we've ripped that straight from the manufacturing floor. But what it does is it gives reassurance to the manufacturing side. Like we're not gonna leave and forget, we're not about to forget everything that we were. So it gives them reassurance, and it helps the people that we've hired and acquired understand this ethos, this mentality. Of the company that they work for, and it's really served as a bridge to kind of bring the two things together.
Operational excellence.
Yes.
A lot of people I know in your company that are into that.
They're very good.
Much.
They're very
Learned
good
a
at
lot.
it.
Anyways, enough of me. There, I go on forever. Comments. Anybody been involved in storytelling? A story to share about it? Does this resonate with you? Question. Jenny, yes. We'll go just, thanks for waiting for the people at home to be able to hear. I always say at home, they're probably in their office. I don't know where they are.
First off, excellent presentation.
Thanks. I'll tell my creative director. I will tell him.
To your first piece of advice up there, are there any particular foils or devices that you use to try to avoid the shiny object syndrome, that maybe like a parking lot kind of situation, anything that you found particularly useful?
Well, that's why we always go back to the ooey center of, you know, where the stories could come from. So did you have to say, like, does this ring true for the business? So my boss actually makes fun of me because my way of avoiding is to always say, like, I'll think about that. He's like, you're never going to think about it. And that's just your way of saying no. And I'm like, okay, fine, you're right. But, you know, we will sort of parking lot it, but we have to get back to, is this true for the business? Is it a bigger priority than anything else? Is it coming from a place of bias? Right? You know, we have dozens of products and services. So every time I would talk to someone, I'd be like, well, does this apply to all of quad? That's how we kind of used it. Is this an all quad positioning, or is this a silo within quad positioning? And when you really kind of start to force people to always remind them, you have to ladder up, you have to think of the bigger picture, I find that they were more willing to say, like, you're right. You're right, it's not an all quad thing. And I was like, it doesn't mean it can't be a priority or we can't position it in product marketing, but it can't be an all brand statement. So that's how we kind of use the lesson there.
Interesting, yeah. Others, more? Anybody in the interwebs? Yeah, right here.
So when you have a perspective of the organization that has really solidly crystallized either internally or out in the marketplace, do you find bringing in an external personality or influencer to it that is known and respected internally or externally to kind of crack that crystal? Can that be helpful, or is that going to do more harm than good?
So I'm going to say both. You know, when we first started, like, one of the first things that we did to ground ourselves in our storytelling was to go through a brand narrative exercise, which I'm sure a lot of you have been through before. And we did bring in an external consultant to do that with us. It was someone we had trusted and worked with in our past. But when it came down to the actual company position, I mean, I had looked through, you know, Quad had no shortage of companies that we had hired before. And so I looked through kind of all of these decks and all of these things. And we were just like, we're going to have to do this ourselves. Because it's not that it can't be done or shouldn't be done, but there was just so many internal layers to navigate. And I don't know about you guys, but as a marketer, like, the best way that I have to internalize something is to write it, right? So we felt at that point we were just going to have to do it ourselves. You know, for the brand campaign and other things like that, we did bring in experts, but once we had that cracked, then we could speak to vendors with real authority about what it needed to be, and it really sharpened our perspective so we knew what was right and what was wrong because we authored it. But there's a lot of good companies out there that do it well. But yeah, in our position, that's just what we felt was right for us.
Outsource the writing of your brand narrative. Not that you were totally outsourcing it. You were working with a facilitator, it sounds
right,
like.
but because you do, yes, it's hard to do that. And you have to find those partners that you trust. I think I was actually telling Roger right before this, you know, I spent 20 years on the agency side. I started out as a copywriter / frustrated strategist. And, you know, I kind of always joke, like, now being client side, if I ever went back agency side, there's a lot of things that I would do differently because the agency model is just so different. And really understanding what your clients' needs are from a business standpoint is particularly important, and not all agencies get that. But so you have to find partners you trust. And I think if you can do that, then work with whoever you like, for sure.
Last call. All right. Well, Heidi Waldowski.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, my oh my, the time has flown by once again. That's almost another, but it is another marketing track. But you've won more. There's yet more today to take. First of all, how did we get to these slides? These are like the beginning. Yes, oh, this is the right one. So first of all, we have a fantastic closing executive panel. Has anybody seen, you know Mark Jeffries, our MC downstairs in the main room? Is that guy fantastic or what? Anyways, this guy can lead, he can do panel like nobody you've ever seen before. So there's going to be a great, we have a great collection, an eclectic collection of people across the UWEBC domain talking about current and contemporary things that are happening in our worlds and in your organization's worlds. Don't miss that. Get your calendars out right now and write down October 1st, 2024. I know you want to block that off. That's our conference next year. Be here for that. And I think with that, that's the blank slide. Yes, this is where the slide deck actually ends and we go off the end of the earth. So I want to thank you all for your time today. Thank you for being here. It's been a pleasure hosting the track and I hope you enjoyed the rest of the day. Thanks.